He left me for a real woman.
So I became the boss of his new girlfriend. Some betrayals cut so deep they carve out entirely new versions of ourselves. What he didn't know was that his cruelest words would become the blueprint for my greatest transformation. By the time I was done, she would be calling me ma'am. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had someone try to define your worth for you, only to watch you redefine it entirely on your own terms. This is a story about discovering that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could never be. My name is Camille. I am 32 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. Until 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. The devoted girlfriend who made quinoa salads and attended yoga retreats, who worked part-time at a nonprofit while my boyfriend of 4 years, Marcus, focused on building his empire. I was the woman who believed that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I was wrong about everything. The morning my life split into before and after started like any other Tuesday. I was in our shared apartment, folding Marcus's shirts with the same meticulous care I brought to everything in our relationship, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The preview of a text message lit up the screen, and I glimpsed just enough words to feel my world tilt sideways. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. She still doesn't know, right? For a moment, I stood there holding one of his expensive button-downs. The fabric soft between my fingers and felt something crystallize inside my chest. Not heartbreak, that would come later. This was recognition. The sudden, terrible clarity that comes when all the small inconsistencies finally arrange themselves into an undeniable truth. I set the shirt down very carefully and picked up his phone. What I found in his messages was a 6-month affair with a woman named Brittany Chun, but it wasn't just the explicit photos or the declarations of love that destroyed me. It was the way he talked about me in those conversations. Camille is so boring, he'd written. She's not even a real woman. Just this weird, health-obsessed girl who thinks she's changing the world with her little non-profit job.
Brittany, you're...
What I need, someone with actual ambition, someone who understands business. I read every message. All of them. I memorized the casual cruelty of his words, the way he reduced 4 years of my life to a punchline shared with his mistress. When I was done, I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone. Then I put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. Marcus came home that evening with flowers, grocery store carnations, the kind he bought when he was feeling guilty about something. He found me sitting at our small dining table, the screenshots, printed and arranged in neat stacks beside my laptop. Camille? His voice carried that particular note of caution men use when they sense they're about to be held accountable for something. I didn't look up from my laptop screen. It was deep in research, something I'd always been good at, but had somehow forgotten about myself. Did you know, I said conversationally, that Brittany Chum works at Morrison and Associates, the marketing firm downtown? The flowers hit the floor. I heard the plastic wrapper crinkle. I can explain. Did you also know, I continued, my voice steady as glass, that Morrison and Associates is currently hiring for a senior director of client strategy? The position was just posted today. Fascinating timing, don't you think? Finally, I looked at him. Marcus stood in our doorway looking like a man who just realized he'd been playing chess while his opponent was playing an entirely different game. I've been doing some reading about the company, I said, gesturing to my laptop. They represent some major nonprofits, actually. The kind of organizations that need consulting on sustainable growth strategies. The kind of work I've been doing. For the past 8 years, just on a smaller scale. Marcus moved closer to the table, his eyes scanning the printed messages. Camille, you called me boring, I said, cutting him off. You said I wasn't a real woman. You said I was just some weird girl playing at changing the world. I closed my laptop and stood up. You were right about one thing. I was playing. But I'm done with games now. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. What does that mean? He asked. I smiled then, and I could see my expression reflected in his eyes, something sharp and unfamiliar, something that made him take a step back. It means I've just applied for the senior director position at your girlfriend's company. It means I'm about to become very, very real. What Marcus didn't know, what no one knew, because I'd never bothered to mention it, was that my little nonprofit job had taught me more about business strategy than his overpriced MBA program ever had. Working with limited resources forces you to be creative, efficient, ruthless when necessary. You learn to do more with less, to find leverage in unexpected places, to build something sustainable from absolutely nothing. You learn to be the kind of real woman who doesn't need anyone's permission to take up space. The morning after our confrontation, Marcus left for work without saying goodbye. I found a note on the kitchen counter explaining that he would be staying with a friend while we figured things out. He signed it M. As if 4 years together had reduced him to an initial. I threw the note away and got it worked out. My application for the Morrison and Associates position was a thing of beauty. I'd spent the entire night crafting it, drawing connections between my nonprofit experience and corporate strategy that even I hadn't fully recognized before. Sustainable community development, I realized, required the same skills as sustainable. Business growth, long-term thinking, stakeholder management, resource optimization, and the ability to create value that extended beyond immediate profit margins. I also did something I'd never done before. I asked for exactly what I was worth. The salary I requested was twice what I'd been making at the nonprofit. It was the kind of money Marcus made, the kind of money that came with respect and authority and the power to make decisions that mattered. As I typed those numbers into the application form, I felt something unlock inside me, not greed, but recognition of my own value. 3 days later, I got a call requesting an interview. Miss Torres? The voice belonged to Jennifer Morrison, the company's founder. I have to say, your application was refreshing. We've been looking for someone who understands that real growth isn't just about numbers, it's about sustainability, community impact, long-term value creation. Would you be available to come in this Friday? I scheduled the interview for 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Then I did something else I'd never done. I went shopping for interview clothes that made me feel powerful instead of apologetic. The woman who walked into Morrison and Associates that Friday was someone I barely recognized. She wore a tailored blazer the color of midnight and carried herself like she belonged in boardrooms. She spoke with authority about market analysis and stakeholder engagement and the kind of strategic thinking that transforms organizations from the inside out. She was everything Marcus had said I could never be, and she was entirely myself. Jennifer Morrison was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She interviewed me personally, along with 2 other senior partners, and I could see the exact moment when they realized I wasn't just another candidate. Tell me about a time when you had to implement change in a resistant organization, Jennifer said. I thought about the nonprofit where I'd worked for 8 years, how I'd slowly transformed their approach to community engagement despite a board of directors who preferred the status quo. Change, I said, is really about translation. You take what people think they want and show them what they actually need. Then you make the path forward feel like their idea. Jennifer smiled. Can you start Monday? Walking out of that interview, I felt like I was inhabiting a body that finally fit. The salary they offered was even higher than what I'd requested, apparently. I'd undervalued myself even when I thought I was being bold. But more than the money, it was the respect in Jennifer's voice when she said, "We need someone who understands that business isn't just about profit. It's about building something that lasts." I called Marcus from the lobby of Morrison and Associates. "Camille?" He sounded surprised to hear from me. "Look, I know things are complicated right now, but maybe we can... I wanted to let you know." "Got the job," I said. "What job?" "At Morrison and Associates. I'm the new senior director of client strategy. I start Monday." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "You're serious," he said finally. "Completely." "Oh, and Marcus, you should probably mention to Brittany that she want to update her LinkedIn. Having a good relationship with senior management is so important in a work environment, don't you think?" I hung up before he could respond. My first day at Morrison and Associates was a masterclass in irony. The office was everything I'd expected: sleek. Glass and exposed brick, the kind of deliberately casual luxury that costs more than most people's rent. But what I hadn't expected was how naturally I fit into it, how right it felt to have my own office with my name on the door and a view of the city that stretched all the way to the mountains. Jennifer had assigned me to oversee several major accounts, including a sustainable energy nonprofit that needed help scaling their operations. It was exactly the kind of work I'd been doing for years, just with resources that actually matched the ambition of the project. I was reviewing client files when my assistant knocked on my door. Double quotes, Miss Torres, there's someone here to see you. Brittany Chun from the marketing department? I looked up from my laptop and there she was. Brittany Chun was exactly what I'd expected from Marcus's descriptions. Polished, confident, the kind of woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a business magazine. She was also, I realized with a start, significantly younger than I'd imagined. 25, maybe 26. Still young enough to believe that ambition and cruelty were the same thing. Miss Torres, she said, extending a manicured hand. I wanted to introduce myself. I've heard so much about your work with community development strategies. I shook her hand and gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please sit and call me Camille. She settled into the chair with the careful grace of someone who'd practiced being poised. I have to say, your reputation preceded you. Jennifer speaks so highly of your innovative approaches to stakeholder engagement. That's kind of her, I said. What can I do for you, Brittany? Well, I'm hoping we might be able to collaborate on some cross-departmental projects. My background is in digital marketing, but I'm really interested in learning more about the strategic side of client development. I studied her face as she spoke. She was beautiful in the way that youth and confidence made people beautiful, but there was something else there, an eagerness that reminded me of myself at that age, when I thought that wanting something badly enough was the same as deserving it. Tell me, I said, what draws you to strategic work? Honestly, I want to understand how to build something that lasts. I'm tired of just executing other people's visions. I want to learn how to create them. Despite everything, I found myself genuinely interested in her answer. And what would you build if you could build anything? Her eyes lit up. I'd love to work with companies that are trying to balance profit with purpose. Like, how do you create sustainable growth that actually makes a difference in the world? It was, I realized, almost exactly what I've said at her age. The irony was so sharp it was almost funny. That's exactly the kind of work we do here, I said. Tell you what, why don't you put together a proposal for how marketing and client strategy could better integrate on our nonprofit accounts? Show me how you'd approach building those partnerships that last. Really? Her face transformed with excitement. Thank you so much, Miss Torres. This is exactly the opportunity I've been hoping for. Camille, I corrected gently. And Brittany? The best strategic thinking comes from understanding all the stakeholders in a situation. Make sure you consider everyone who might be affected by the choices you make. After she left, I sat in my office looking out at the city and feeling something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, though there had been something deeply gratifying about the way she'd called me Miss Torres with such genuine respect. It was more like recognition, the sense that I was finally becoming someone. I always had the potential to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my new role with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. The nonprofit energy company became my flagship account, and within a month, I'd helped them secure funding for expansion into 3 new markets. Jennifer started bringing me into high-level strategy meetings with the firm's biggest clients. You have a gift for this, she told me after a particularly successful presentation. The way you think about long-term impact, it's exactly what our clients need right now. But it was my evolving relationship with Brittany that proved most interesting. She'd submitted her collaboration proposal within a week, and it was genuinely impressive, thoughtful, innovative, the kind of cross-departmental thinking that could transform how the company approached client relationships. I approved her proposal and assigned her to work directly with me on the energy nonprofit account. I can't believe you're giving me this opportunity, she said during our first official strategy meeting. Most senior directors would never take a chance on someone from marketing. Strategy isn't about departments, I told her. It's about perspectives. You see things I might miss. What I didn't tell her was that working with her was teaching me something important about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been destroying her relationship with Marcus, getting her fired, using my position to make her professional life miserable. Justice, I was learning, was something more complex and ultimately more satisfying. Justice was becoming the kind of leader I wished I'd had when I was her age. Our work together was genuinely collaborative. Brittany had brilliant insights about digital engagement strategies, and I had the experience to help her think about long-term implementation. The Energy Nonprofit Project became a case study in how different skill sets could complement each other when trust and respect were the foundation. It was during our third week of collaboration that Marcus finally cornered me. I was leaving the office late one evening when I found him waiting by my car in the parking garage. He looked terrible, exhausted, rumpled, like someone who'd been sleeping poorly for weeks. Camille, please, we need to talk. I stopped walking but didn't move closer. What about Marcus? About us, about what happened. I made a mistake. You made a choice, I corrected. Several of them, actually, over the course of 6 months. I know. But I realize now that I was wrong. About everything, about you, about what I wanted. He ran his hands through his hair. You were never boring, Camille. You were just better than I was ready to appreciate. I looked at him standing there in the fluorescent lighting of the parking garage and felt something settle inside me. Not forgiveness, that would take much longer, if it ever came at all. But a kind of finality, like closing a book I finished reading. You're right, I said. I was better than you were ready to appreciate. But Marcus, I wasn't better for you. I was just better. What does that mean? It means I spent 4 years trying to be someone you could love instead of being someone I could respect. It means I confused making myself smaller with being generous and mistook your limitation for my ceiling. He stepped closer and I could see desperation in his eyes. But we could start over. Now that I've become what? Successful, he said, as if the word explained everything. Important. The kind of woman you could be proud of. I finished. Marcus, I was always that woman. You just weren't the kind of man who could see it. I unlocked my car and opened the door. What about Brittany? He asked suddenly. I paused, one foot inside the car. What about her? Are you going to ... I mean, does she know? About us? Brittany knows that her professional development is my priority, I said. Everything else is between you and her. She's been different lately, he said quietly. More focused on work, less interested in ... us. I think she's figured out that we used to. Marcus. I turned to face him fully. Brittany is 25 years old. She's brilliant, ambitious, and at the beginning of what could be an extraordinary career. Whatever she decides about your relationship is her choice to make, but I hope she chooses herself. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing alone under the harsh lights. The next morning, Brittany knocked on my office door earlier than usual. She looked different, more serious, less polished around the edges. Do you have a few minutes? She asked. Of course, come in. She sat down across from my desk, but didn't speak immediately. Finally, she said, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. I'll try. You used to date Marcus Rivera, didn't you? I'd been expecting this question for weeks, but it still landed with weight. Yes, I said simply. She nodded slowly. I thought so. He's been strange lately. Talking about his ex-girlfriend who got this big job, making comments about how women change when they get power. She looked up at me. I put it together. How do you feel about that? Honestly. Confused? and maybe a little embarrassed. She paused. He told me you were boring, that you didn't have any real ambition. And what do you think now? I think he was describing someone I've never met. She leaned forward. Camille, working with you these past few weeks has been the most professionally stimulating experience I've had since I started here. You're not just smart, you're wise. You see things from angles I wouldn't even think to consider. Thank you. That means a lot. The thing is, she continued, I'm starting to realize that if he could be so wrong about you, he might be wrong about other things too. About what matters, about what success looks like, about what makes someone worth loving. I was quiet for a moment, choosing my words carefully. What do you think makes someone worth loving? I used to think it was about being impressive. Being the kind of person other people would envy. She looked out my office window, but watching you work, seeing how you treat people, even people who are junior to you, I think maybe it's about being the kind of person who makes other people better just by being around them. That's very insightful. Is that why you ended things with him? Partly, I said, but mostly because I realized I was trying to be someone he could love instead of being someone I could respect. And those turned out to be very different people. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I think I need to make some decisions about my own life. Whatever you decide, I told her, make sure you're deciding for yourself, not against someone else. The transformation came gradually, then all at once. By the end of my second month at Morrison & Associates, I was leading strategy for 5 major accounts and had been invited to present at the company's annual conference. The energy nonprofit had become one of our most successful case studies. And Brittany's marketing innovations were being implemented across multiple client relationships, but the real change was internal. I began to understand that Marcus had been wrong about more than just my potential. He'd been wrong about what made a woman real. A real woman, I discovered, wasn't someone who demanded attention or played games or defined herself in opposition to other women. A real woman was someone who knew her own worth and didn't need external validation to prove it. The morning Brittany resigned from her relationship with Marcus was the same morning she asked if she could apply to transfer into the client strategy department permanently. Are you sure that's what you want? I asked. I've never been more sure of anything, she said. This work, this team, this is where I belong. Marcus was right about one thing. I do have ambition. I just confused it with trying to be someone. I'm not. And who are you? She smiled. I'm someone who wants to build things that last. And I'm someone who's learned that the best way to do that is to work with people who see your potential instead of your limitations. I approved her transfer request that afternoon. The epilogue to my story came 6 months later at the Morrison, an associate's annual holiday party. I was standing near the windows overlooking the city, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly rent at the nonprofit when Jennifer Morrison approached me. Camille, I wanted to talk to you about something. Of course. I'm considering opening a Portland branch focused exclusively on sustainable development consulting. I need someone to head it up, someone who understands both the business side and the community impact side. She paused. I think you're exactly what we need. It would mean a promotion to partner level, my own team, the kind of autonomy I'd dreamed about but never dared to ask for. Jennifer, I don't know what to say. Say yes, called a voice behind me. I turned to see Brittany approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. But seriously, Camille, this is perfect for you. You think so? No, so... You're the best strategic thinker I've ever worked with. And you're the kind of leader who makes everyone around you better. She handed me one of the champagne glasses. Plus, someone needs to keep showing the rest of us what it looks like to be a real woman in business. I looked out at the city lights, thinking about the woman I'd been a year ago and the woman I was becoming. What does that look like, do you think? Like someone who defines success for herself, Brittany said. Like someone who lifts other people up instead of tearing them down. Like someone who knows that real power comes from building something bigger than yourself. Jennifer raised her glass. To real women in business. To real women everywhere, I corrected, and we drank to that dot later that evening, as I was getting ready to leave. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from Marcus. Saw the announcement about your promotion in the business journal. Congratulations. You were right about everything. I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations I'd learned were already finished even when the other person didn't realize it yet. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office corner suite, downtown Portland. My name on the door in elegant gold lettering when Brittany knocked with our morning coffee. She'd become my deputy director, and our sustainable development consultancy was already exceeding every projection Jennifer had made. The Community Energy Cooperative wants to expand into renewable storage, she said, settling into the chair. Across from my desk, I think we could help them secure federal funding for the pilot program. Excellent thinking. What's your timeline? I'm hoping to have a preliminary proposal ready by Friday. She paused. You know, sometimes I think about how different things might have been if Marcus hadn't been such an ass. I looked up from my laptop. Different how? Well, if he hadn't cheated, you might still be at the nonprofit. We might never have met. I might still be thinking that success meant impressing the wrong people instead of building something meaningful. Do you regret how things worked out? Not for a second, she said. But I do wonder sometimes if he realizes what he lost. I thought about Marcus, about the man who called me boring and ordinary and not a real woman. The man who'd measured my worth by his ability to brag about me at parties, who'd seen my compassion as weakness and my depth as dullness. I hope he does realize it, I said finally. Not because I want him to suffer, but because understanding what he lost might help him avoid losing something else that matters. Very magnanimous of you. Not magnanimous, I corrected. Just complete. There's nothing left of that relationship that I need to resolve or understand or fix. It taught me what I needed to learn, and now it's over. Brittany smiled. That's very zen of you, boss. Don't call me boss. Fine. That's very zen of you, real woman. I laughed, and the sound echoed off the windows of my corner office, mixing with the noise of the city below and the hum of a business built on the foundation of people choosing themselves. This morning, almost 2 years after that devastating Tuesday when I discovered Marcus's betrayal, I woke up in my own apartment, the kind of place I'd always dreamed of living but never thought I could afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, a kitchen where I could cook for friends who appreciated both my ambition and my quinoa salads, made coffee in my expensive machine, and stood at my window looking out at a city that no longer felt too big for me. My consultancy was thriving. I had a team of people who respected my leadership, and I was building the kind of career that would last decades instead of months. But the real victory wasn't professional. It was personal. I had become someone I genuinely liked, someone whose choices I respected, someone who took up exactly as much space as she needed without apology. Marcus had been right about one thing. I wasn't the same woman I'd been when we were together, but he'd been wrong about everything else. I hadn't become harder or colder or more ruthless. I'd become more myself, more generous with my talents, more confident in my instincts, more willing to bet on people who were willing to bet on themselves. The woman he called boring had been afraid to be interesting. The woman he called unambitious had been afraid to want more. The woman he called not real had been afraid to exist at full volume. The woman I now isn't afraid of anything. As I was getting ready for work, my phone rang. It was Jennifer, calling from the corporate office. Camille, I have some exciting news. The Portland branch has exceeded all expectations, and the board wants to discuss expanding the sustainable development model to Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver. We're talking about a regional directorship. I looked at myself in the mirror-tailored blazer, confident posture, eyes that didn't look away from challenges, and smiled. Tell me more, I said. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told you weren't enough of something, I want to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could never be, and discovering that their opinion was never the measure of your worth to begin with. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. You just need the courage to claim it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Revenge Treats for more stories about transformation, justice, and the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong, especially yourself.